Welcome to the Power Source Podcast. Recently, I had an opportunity to sit down with Luke Ball. Luke is the president and CEO of Strategies based in Washington, D.C. He's also a regular on Newsmax and Fox News, as well as Victory News and Flashpoint. So take time right now to stop what you're doing, like, subscribe, share this video, because this is an interview that needs to get out there. It's one you won't want to miss. Luke Ball, welcome to the Power Source Podcast.
My friend Jason, thank you for having me on. It's great to be joining you, and especially with the amount of ministry that you've had in my life over the last few years. And I know that those associated with the TV shows you work on, it's just really good to be able to have this conversation today.
I really appreciate you being with us. Listen, I just want to get right into it. There's a lot of things happening, obviously, in the world. The last time you and I spoke, Charlie Kirk had just been assassinated, and it's been several months now, and we're looking back on that. But I feel like what happened, Luke, when that took place is kind of the floodgates on crazy opened up. Recently, I had a friend, Matthew Faraci, on the podcast, and we were talking about the rise of anti-Semitism on the right. We talked about some of the stuff that's been going on with Tucker and Candace. And this, just recently, you had Charlie's head of security had to go on the Sean Ryan show to debunk all the crazy stuff that's out there in the Twitterverse and in the social media accounts and influencers and everything. Let's talk about that for a second as we jump into this podcast. How did we get to this place?
I'm really glad that you brought that up, because it's a division within our movement, and it's something that's not being addressed appropriately in many circumstances. First of all, whenever Charlie was assassinated, I walked around numb for a week. I'm sure many people did, but as folks who are in political commentary and in conservative commentary, we were never trying to beat Charlie Kirk. We were always just trying to emulate him. I looked around at my colleagues. I'm like, we're all trying to get to this level. It was never that Charlie was a contemporary of us. It was like he was light years ahead and
Absolutely.
Really set a standard. And his assassination revealed that he was a bulwark to some of the garbage that we have seen cropping up in our own party, in our own movement. And I would not even affiliate them with our own party. I doubt they would affiliate themselves with the party or the movement. They have tried to carve out their own and hijack elements of the conservative or MAGA movement. And it's just really disheartening to see. We can have a conversation on foreign affairs and foreign funding and what countries we should support and to what extent. But what they've done is taken that foreign policy discussion and used it as an excuse to try and mask their anti-Semitism. So you can say, hey, I don't agree with this, but you could say, hey, I don't think we should be funding Israel at all, and still have that as a foreign policy position. But what they'll do is they'll say, we shouldn't be funding Israel at all, and then start belittling and diminishing and accusing the Jewish people of various things. And that's just deeply disheartening. The conspiracy theories that pop up out of this stuff is also really concerning to me, because they just kind of run wild. And this is such a crucial time that we have right now, where we have the House of Representatives, we have the Senate and the White House, and all of this infighting that's going on right now is not what the American people sent us up here to do. They did not want this sort of sideshow going on within their own party and distracting from all of the good work that the president has been doing and the work that the Congress has been trying to do. And I don't know what's going on over in the Senate, but I guess maybe some of the good things that they once in a while do. I'm a House guy. I don't care what goes on over in the Senate. So I really hate that there is now this splinter with two different sides trying to lay hold to the MAGA movement or the conservative movement. But that doesn't mean it's time to shrink from the conversation. It just means that we now have to state things so very clearly and be willing to upset people within our own movement or within our own party if they start picking sides.
That is so right. And I'm really concerned because obviously as we're pressing ahead into the midterms, when I first started hearing this stuff, I thought, those guys are wackos. They're whack jobs. But the more that I watched and read and saw what was happening online, I realized that there are millions of people, Luke, that believe this stuff, that are following this stuff. It's getting a foothold within our movement. And I truly believe it's the one thing, probably more than anything else, that could divide the coalition that President Trump put together. How do we reverse this course and keep this MAGA coalition together going into the midterms?
Well, I've seen it a lot online. I've seen it on X. I've seen it on various social media platforms. And unfortunately, it just seems as if the people who say the most outlandish things do so in order to get clicks and likes and retweets by large followings who perhaps built up their following through some other advocacy, but then pivoted towards this and have a large sway of influence over others. I despise the fact that Tucker had that guy on his podcast. I really also hated the way that many in our movement, including some of our friends over at Heritage, responded to that. I did not think that the video met the moment. I'm sure maybe the intention behind it was different. I just think it's okay to say that didn't work. I hate how Candace has been talking. Like, a lot of folks have just fallen off the wagon. Again, foreign policy debate is different than what we're talking about here and now. So trying to cut through the noise and standing firm on the stuff that we had talked about that formulated the MAGA movement in the last 4 years, the things that really won, like the economic talking points, the law and order, the things of that nature, separate those from the ridiculousness that we have seen crop up over the conversations surrounding Israel and anti-Semitism, and ensure that we aren't just falling prey to what people online might think. The reason it's so prevalent on X and online is because people have so much time to spend there. Like, I don't know about you, but I rarely go on social media during the day. I have to monitor the news, so I scroll, but I rarely post unless I do an interview. And for people who have nothing else to do, they go down these rabbit trails and they just completely insulate themselves and box themselves in and get to spend all this time creating ridiculous content instead of being out in the real world and interacting with real people. So it's concerning to see it in my age group too,
Sure.
because there's really been a spike of it, and there's that element of, oh, it's edgy. I'm getting a reaction. I'm getting people pushing back hard, and people like when that happens, but they're doing it for all the wrong reasons at a horrible cost.
Absolutely. And I think what happened is obviously coming through COVID and coming through the lockdowns and even the 2020 election and all those things, we as a people, especially as a conservative movement, learned to really question a lot of things that we thought to be one way. And we realized, man, we're being lied to on a lot of fronts. But now the pendulum has swung to the other side. And I feel like it's important that we are able to still identify truth in the middle of all the chaos and the noise. As Christians, I feel like we really need to wake up to the fact that there is a real worldview warfare taking place. You're in the media industry day in, day out. That's what I do for a living as well. Let's talk a little bit about how that works. We talk a lot about narratives. We talk a lot about how a narrative is created. Walk me through that, because several years ago, you and I had the opportunity to, at one of our Flashpoint events, to kind of peel back the curtain and show how the lobbyist stuff works in Washington. Talk to me a little bit about how a media narrative is created and then rolled out to the masses.
First of all, I want to bring up a word that you just said, and it's worldview. In this town of DC, and really in the media at large, everybody's story is going to have a slant in it, whether they want it to or not, and it is completely based on their worldview. So we were just talking about the rise of anti-Semitism among the right. The people who are promulgating that are not Christians. The ones who are pushing that narrative may claim to be Christians, but it does not model Christ, and the fruit is not there. And so while I'm interacting in this mission field of media and politics, I do so from a standpoint of peace. Sometimes I have to remind myself that I need to be at that standpoint, but I understand that Christ is in control, that he has already won the victory. We're just engaging in these little skirmishes and battles until ultimately he claims that final victory. Others don't see it that way. They have kind of a nihilist approach, which is kind of completely counterpoint to conservatism at large. Because, like, if we're just some accident, if we're just some cosmic belch that came about and we've crawled over each other and through macroevolution we have evolved over a period of time, then, like, I've completely wasted my life. I think it was Paul that said, I've of all men be most miserable because I've devoted my life to Christ, and I could have been out there having fun if all of this is fake. I would be the most radical progressive lunatic on the planet if I weren't a Christian, because I would just completely embrace humanism. That's what all these other people do. So you're talking about media narratives. In order to frame a narrative, a lot of times, or even just spin up a story, you have to leverage media contacts and you have to try and convince people to write a story. So for example, we have a client yesterday who came to us and said, "Hey, the Michigan Board of Education just voted 6-2 to say that gender ideology must be injected into classrooms." It was over the objections of parents. They even had one scientist in public comments say that parents do not know best, the experts know best. And frankly, that's because the left thinks that all the world's problems can be solved by more government and more education, and that government funds the education, and that education points people back to the government, and it's a very circular sphere. So when you create that echo chamber, what comes out of that are people who go and become journalists and try to promulgate that worldview that basically is criticizing Christians and pushing back against that entire worldview. So anyway, we took that story and we brought it to a reporter's attention and said, "Hey, would you like to do a story on it?" And right before I came over to the podcast, they just had an interview on it, and they're going to get that message out to the world, because those are some of our friends in conservative media who are willing to push that story. But if that had gone to a liberal outlet or somebody that claims to be mainstream or the legacy media, they'd look at that and they wouldn't care at all. They would just say, well, this is normal to have parents out there, or rather to have a school board out there that is trying to affirm the identity that a child presents. And so they would suppress that story, if not praise the outcome of the school board meeting, to try and deliver to their audience a message that over time permeates into the culture at large. And so then you look at the decay of our culture, and we're even having a conversation again about the Supreme Court declining to take up gay marriage. In 2013, this was a hotbed political issue in the Republican Party. And frankly, the Republican Party has completely lost the mantle on social conservatism. And I think it's in large part because the media just tried to normalize it through television shows and entertainment and through newscasts. So when you're trying to spin a narrative, look at where the source is coming from, and also look at who's funding it. If you're watching television, look at who the advertisers are in between the different breaks, because those are the people who are affirming and supporting and paying for the content that is going on in between those different commercial breaks, as opposed to other folks who are able to go out there and actually just speak the truth from a platform of a Christian biblical worldview.
I know that as a Christian population, we have historically wanted to believe media. You know, in the olden days, we would sit at home, we would turn on the TV, and we'd listen to Walter Cronkite or whoever it was when our parents were growing up. And we know that media in general, the legacy media, is dying off. But there's a rise of this new media, social media, especially the influencers and people that are doing what they do online. I think that's why it's so important that we absolutely can identify truth in all this, Luke, because there's so many voices now. There's so many voices that are out there. I feel like as Christians, one of the things that we have been lacking in recent years is that spirit of discernment, to actually be able to discern truth from fiction. How can the Christian populace once again tap into that discernment that's God-given inside all of us, so that when they hear something or see something, they can go, that doesn't resonate with me?
Well, first of all, just because there are independent journalists who are posting on social media doesn't mean that they are always posting the truth. That spirit of discernment you're talking about should be applied to legacy media outlets, cable television, social media posts. Even just yesterday, I saw a social media post that said, "Breaking news, this person has just been arrested. They were close to Donald Trump." And it was somebody that had been arrested like 2 years ago.
Right.
And the video was like 6 months old, and they were presenting it as if it were something new. And maybe one person in the comments underneath it said, "Hey, this isn't accurate." And I was watching a YouTube video last night. Some self-proclaimed theologian was talking, and he got a fact egregiously wrong. And it was pointed out later, but it was never corrected in the original video. So it's almost like that principle of when a preacher is preaching and scripture tells us to search the scriptures like the Bereans would do to make sure that what they were hearing was actually accurate. Take that same principle and apply it to your news consumption. Just because you heard it doesn't mean it's accurate. You have to make sure that you are dissecting the news, first of all, from a Christian worldview and understanding where that person's worldview who's telling you the news is coming from. But secondly, looking to see if it's accurate before going out there and sharing it. Could be something as simple as a social media post. I see folks sharing things all the time that are obviously AI, and maybe they don't recognize that, and it's something that's fake. So it's easy to be fooled and tricked, which is why we have to be vigilant and on guard.
So we're 10 months in now to this Trump season. There's been a lot of things that he's accomplished. There's been a lot of things that are wins, but there's been a lot of chaos as well. Where are we at looking at the midterms, and are we going to be able to regain the momentum that we had coming into the first part of this year?
We all have spiritual gifts. Some it's administration, some it's preaching, some it's teaching. And the Republican spiritual gift is messing up a golden opportunity of having the House, the Senate, and the White House over and over again. I remember when Paul Ryan was Speaker, and we've slipped up a couple of times now. So I'm not sure, Jason. It's political light years away. For the American people, it's not what have you done for me, it's what have you done for me lately. So ultimately, I've seen liberal and conservative commentators come down on the very obvious same conclusion that it will be about the economy. Affordability has been on the forefront of Americans' minds right now. One of my friends, who is the deputy chief of staff over at the White House, just said on a podcast that you would probably see the president talking about affordability in the next few months very keenly and trying to draw a distinction from what the Democrats have to offer. So I don't know if we're going to be prepared for the midterms. I wouldn't say it's because Donald Trump has not fulfilled his campaign promises, of course. Right. I would say it's because we just can't seem to get our act together, whether it be individual political candidates trying to criticize President Trump and splinter off to start their own path, whether it be not having a cohesive message on things like the Epstein files, not being able to balance a budget, which is like the fundamental responsibility of the United States Congress. They haven't done that since I was 2 years old, by the way. I'd like to think I'm young, but I have lower back pain, and cars made the year I was born qualify for antique license plates. So it's been a little while since they actually accomplished it. I like to go back to what Jim Jordan said. Just go do what you said you would do. When you're on the campaign trail and you're making all these promises, it's really not that hard to be a member of Congress once you get elected. You just go up and execute on the campaign promises that you told your constituents that you were going to do. But too many people get up here and they hand their voting card over to leadership, or they just check with the whip's offices recommending that somebody vote a certain way, and they just go along to get along so that they can get, money funneled in from the NRCC and have easy re-elections. And if they decide to retire at a ripe old age of 45 and go be a lobbyist over on K Street for a little while, that's the path the swamp offers. It's a really easy path. It's a really cushy path if you don't come up here and actually fight for the principles that you promised the American people you get up here. So your question was, are we ready for the midterms? I would say that if the midterms were a midterm exam like you had in college, we're going to have to do some cramming in the last few months in order to get to where we need to be.
Luke, it's always great to hear from you, man. I, as someone that's there in D.C. day in, day out, I know that you have your finger on the political pulse of our nation. I really appreciate you taking the time to spend with us today here at the Power Source Podcast.
Thanks, brother. Appreciate you.